At dawn, a silent aircraft rolls onto a runway in China. No roaring turbines, no smell of kerosene, just 8 tons of metal, batteries, and one dangerous question: can electricity finally conquer commercial aviation across the world? For decades, engineers treated that question like a locked door. Batteries were simply too heavy. Jet fuel carried enormous energy without carrying its own weight. Every calculation ended the same way: electric passenger flight was impossible today. Then China's battery giant CATL announced something that made aviation engineers look twice: a battery designed around 500 watt-hours per kilogram. That number matters because aircraft live or die by every kilogram they carry in practice today. But there is a catch: CATL's technology is not magic, and its aviation ambitions remain under development. Claims about future aircraft must still survive certification, flight testing, reliability trials, and the brutal economics of airline service today. So forget the hype for a moment. Look inside a conventional lithium-ion battery. Lithium ions travel through an electrolyte between electrodes. The chemistry is efficient, but packing more energy increases heat, stress, and safety challenges inside today. Push conventional cells harder, and another enemy appears: dendrites. Tiny metallic structures can grow during repeated cycling. If they reach the opposite electrode, they can trigger an internal short circuit, potentially causing dangerous thermal runaway in practice. Now imagine that happening inside a passenger aircraft. A battery fire is not merely an inconvenience. At 30,000 feet, aviation demands layers of containment, monitoring, redundancy, and emergency protection that cars simply do not need alone. Weight creates the bigger nightmare. Jet fuel gets burned during flight, so the aircraft becomes lighter as the journey continues. Batteries do not disappear. Every kilowatt-hour you carry remains attached to the airplane until landing. At landing, that changes everything. An electric aircraft cannot simply replace fuel tanks with batteries and keep the same design. Engineers must redesign the structure, propulsion system, thermal management, and even the mission around the battery's limitations from scratch. Then came solid-state batteries. The promise sounded perfect: replace flammable liquid electrolyte with a solid material, increase energy density, and create a safer cell. Investors poured money into the idea, expecting aviation to follow at scale worldwide. But laboratories discovered a stubborn enemy: interfaces. Solid materials can expand, contract, crack, or lose contact during cycling. A battery that looks brilliant in controlled testing can behave very differently after thousands of real-world cycles in service. There is another problem: manufacturing. Producing advanced solid-state cells consistently can require demanding materials processing and precision equipment. Aviation does not need one spectacular prototype, it needs thousands of reliable cells, every single time for commercial airlines. This is where CATL's approach becomes interesting. Its condensed matter battery sits between traditional liquid cells and fully solid designs. The company says the technology uses an electrolyte system to combine high energy density with improved safety. Think of the difference as flexibility versus rigidity. Instead of forcing every internal layer to behave like a ceramic wall, engineers are trying to create materials that tolerate movement while still controlling the chemistry inside the cell. CATL has publicly reported energy density around 500 watt-hours per kilogram for its condensed matter battery. That is an extraordinary laboratory and product development target, but an aircraft battery must prove far more than energy density in flight. It must deliver power quickly. Takeoff is the brutal moment. The aircraft needs a surge to accelerate from a standstill, climb, and maintain control. High energy density without sufficient power would leave the plane stranded on runway. It must also survive temperature swings. High altitude air can be extremely cold, while batteries sitting on a sun-heated airport apron can experience very different conditions. Thermal management becomes an aircraft system, not merely a battery feature everywhere. And then there is vibration. Turbulence shakes the aircraft. Landing shocks the structure. Motors generate continuous mechanical loads. Every cell, connector, cooling channel, and protective layer must keep functioning while the airplane is being battered in flight. Aviation adds another requirement: graceful failure. If one cell misbehaves, the aircraft cannot depend on luck. Designers need isolation, monitoring, redundant electrical paths, and containment so one problem does not become an aircraft-wide emergency during emergencies too. That is why the headline number alone is not enough. 500 watt-hours per kilogram could open a door, but certification decides whether the door leads into commercial aviation. The gap between prototype and airline service remains. Still, the possibility is fascinating. If batteries become light enough, regional aircraft could change. Smaller airports could connect directly. Noise could fall. Maintenance could change, and energy costs could become less exposed to swings in oil price. Imagine a regional route where passengers board without the turbine roar. Instead, electric motors spin quietly, delivering torque almost instantly. The aircraft climbs, cruises, and returns to the airport without burning a single drop of jet fuel. But the charging problem arrives immediately. Commercial aircraft cannot sit beside a gate for hours waiting for energy. Airports would need powerful charging infrastructure, grid upgrades, storage systems, and turnaround procedures designed around aircraft rather than automobiles. The airplane itself becomes part of the battery equation. Engineers can place cells strategically, balance weight across the airframe, and design propulsion around electric motors. Every component must work together because wasted mass directly steals range directly. That is why China's industrial advantage matters. CATL already operates at enormous battery manufacturing scale. If aviation cells can share enough production knowledge with automotive batteries, the path from prototype to factory may become shorter. Today at scale, China also has a major aerospace partner, COMAC, the state-owned aircraft manufacturer behind programs such as the C919A battery company, and an aircraft manufacturer working together can solve integration problems earlier than either could alone together. But partnership is not the same as certification. A passenger aircraft must satisfy structural, electrical, fire, propulsion, evacuation, and operational requirements. Future Chinese electric aircraft will still have to prove their safety through testing and regulatory approval. And the 3,000-kilometer figure deserves caution. A range claim depends on payload, reserves, weather, cruise speed, battery condition, temperature, and operating assumptions. Real airline range is never simply the maximum published range claim in reality at all. Even so, regional aviation is the battlefield where electric propulsion has its best chance. Shorter routes require less stored energy, while frequent departures make fuel savings potentially valuable. The first breakthrough will likely be regional, not intercontinental. Picture the economics. Jet fuel as a consumable. Electricity can be sourced from grids, renewables, nuclear, hydro, or other generation. That does not automatically make electric flight cheap, but it could change where aviation's energy dependence sits. Oil producers would not disappear from aviation. Long-haul aircraft would remain difficult to electrify because batteries store far less energy per kilogram than aviation fuel. A battery revolution would begin at the regional edge, not Pacific crossing. The real prize is not one airplane, it is the ecosystem around it: batteries, motors, charging stations, maintenance procedures, pilot training, software, safety standards, and airport infrastructure. Whoever builds that ecosystem could influence how electric aviation evolves. But there is another possibility. What if the technology improves faster than expected? Better cathodes, stronger electrolytes, improved thermal systems, and smarter battery management could gradually push aircraft range upward, turning regional experiment into tomorrow's larger market. That is the moment worth watching, not because one company has already rewritten aviation, but because the energy density barrier is being attacked from multiple directions. Electric flight is moving from fantasy toward an engineering race right now. By 2027, the crucial question may not be whether an electric passenger aircraft exists, it may be whether airlines can operate it safely, repeatedly, and economically. That is far harder than making one prototype fly in practice. If China succeeds, the impact could reach far beyond one aircraft. Batteries, airports, manufacturers, and regulators would gain a new template for regional aviation. Competitors in America and Europe would face pressure to develop alternatives quickly worldwide. But here is where the story gets bigger. If an electric aircraft can eventually cover regional routes, airports may become quieter, cleaner, and less dependent on fuel deliveries. The transformation would not arrive overnight. It would begin with carefully chosen routes where battery weight, charging time, passenger demand, and safety margins actually make sense on airline schedules, with passengers, weather, tight turnarounds, and safety checks. And that creates a race far beyond CATL. Boeing, Airbus, European battery companies, American startups, and researchers everywhere are watching the same energy density curve. Whoever solves the full equation first will not simply sell batteries, they could influence aircraft architecture, airport infrastructure, charging standards, maintenance systems, and the economics of regional travel for decades across borders as governments compete to shape aviation standards for decades. There is also a hidden question: where does the electricity come from? An electric aircraft is only as clean as the energy system supporting it. Renewable power could make the advantage enormous, while fossil-heavy grids would shrink the climate benefit. So the real revolution is not battery versus jet fuel alone, it is an entire energy system being rebuilt around flight for the planet too. Now imagine standing beside the runway in 2027. The motors begin spinning. There is no familiar turbine scream, only a rising electric whine. The aircraft accelerates, lifts its nose, and disappears into the sky. That moment would not prove electric aviation has won, it would prove something more important. The impossible has become testable, and the race has officially begun for aviation in nearby cities. But passengers will decide the final chapter. Airlines will ask how much each flight costs, how quickly the aircraft can recharge, how long batteries last, and what happens when something fails. Regulators will demand evidence, not headlines. If those answers are strong, electric regional aviation could grow quickly. If they are weak, the dream stays on the runway before passenger service begins for ordinary travelers. So, would you board one? Imagine your flight is fully certified, the aircraft has completed thousands of safe test flights, and the route is only a few hours long. Would you trust a battery-powered passenger plane, or would you still choose a conventional jet? Tell me your answer in the comments, and if this technology race surprised you, subscribe for the next mystery ever before. But the real question is no longer, can an electric plane fly? It's, how far can this technology go? If engineers solve range, charging, safety, and battery life, the skies could look completely different within a decade. China may be testing the first pieces of that future right now. So, would you trust an electric passenger aircraft? Tell me in the comments and subscribe for the next breakthrough before the world notices.